Hello, all viewers and listeners. Welcome to yet another episode of Pathways to the Ivies. Today on our show, we have the brilliant, one of our longest standing partners, Shanza Khan. Shanza Khan is actually the founder and CEO of Ion Ivy, a college counseling firm recognized for its commitment to research, systems, and management. She holds a Master's of Art in Public Policy from the mighty Harvard University, where she was fortunate to be awarded a fully funded Dean's Fellowship. Sh- During her time at Harvard, she was honored with the Mansbridge Award and Roy Scholarship. She also graduated summa cum laude in economics at the Emory University at the young age of just 19 and with magna cum laude in business administration from Mount Marty College at just 17. I'm very happy, and it's my privilege to get her on this podcast. Shanza, welcome to this podcast. How does it feel, with all those achievements and guiding so many students to their desired college? How does that feel like, Shanza?
Hi, Reema. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to your show. It's an honor and privilege always to talk to your audience. Um, it's definitely been a journey. We missed. Many of the audience members don't know that I spent a significant part of my life actually working as an economist for the World Bank and Federal Reserve Bank. This is, in fact, my second reincarnation of college counseling. So Ion Ivy was started in 2018. But since then, we've had phenomenal achievements. And for me, the greatest pride is working with students, making sure they're on the right track. It gives me joy. I love what I do.
That is good to know. And I think for somebody who's, quit a career and, kind of digressed into something which they find equally passionate about, shows how much commitment you have for the profession you are currently in. And I can attest personally to, your stats, the kind of students you deal with, and the admissions that you've gotten are phenomenal. So that's just been my personal experience. But again,
Thank you.
thank you so much for coming to this podcast. I truly
It's
appreciate
a
it.
pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. All right. So let's get started. I have a few questions that I want to get started this time. And we're going to talk about honors, something that, not many people know or speak about. We're going to dive into details about it and how can you represent that on the Common App and how do they really add value to your application. So let's get started.
Absolutely.
Your first question. For a listener who's never seen the Common App, what actually is the honors section? How many entries, what fields, and why does something this small get so much of attention?
So, Rima, the honors section is one of the simplest parts of the Common App, but it's also one of the most strategic. Students can list up to 5 academic honors or awards, and for each one, they have to provide the title and indicate in a checkbox whether it was a school level award, a regional, state, national, or international award. They have to note the grade level they got it in, and they have to briefly describe it in about 100 characters. Why does it get so much attention? Because it's one of the few places where achievement is actually distilled into objective evidence. The essays tell colleges about who you are, the activities show where have you spent your time. But the honors answer a different question. Has someone outside your school or family recognized your excellence? And that external validation is what carries weight.
Understood. So, in your opinion, that is actually a very integral section when it comes down to colleges, um, even trying to vet out an applicant whether they're a good fit or not.
So, absolutely, as I was talking about, it's that external validation that is not really coming in the other parts of the student's application. You have your background section, the profile section, the essays where you've claiming certain things, the activities which are showcasing how you've spent your time. Your letters of reference are an external validation, but in your application itself, when the admission officer is trying to assess, you're claiming that you are passionate about biology. Well, have you participated in the US Biology Olympiad and won? So, participation unfortunately does not count for much in the T20 calculation. It's about the wins, and that's why they're asking you, what level did you win? It's that external validation of your claims, and that is why it is a very important section in the entire application.
That is good to know. Absolutely. So, where does this relatively sit, with respect, like in comparison to the activity list? Why do colleges even need a separate section for this? Because, I mean, I understand there's an external validation, but what is so important about it that there is a separate section created for it on the Common App?
So the activity section tell you the story of what you did. But it is the honors section that tell the story of how well you did it. So think about a student who conducts research. The activity explains the research experience, but if that research won place at a national science competition or the International Science and Engineering Fair, that's an achievement that deserves its own spotlight. Separating activities from honors helps admission officers quickly distinguish participation from recognition. That's why it deserves its own space.
Wow, I like that distinction. Activities could be just participation, but honors is like, you're recognized for that. Like you're in the top 10%, top
Certainly.
20%, whatever it is. So that's good to know. You only get 5 slots and 100 characters per title. What's the biggest mistake families make deciding what earns one of those top 5 spots?
The biggest mistake I think families make is thinking quantity beats significance. So families often try to fill all 5 spaces with certificates simply because that's what they have. However, they should step back. Every honor should be answering one question: does this strengthen the student's academic narrative? If so, it belongs, but if not, it doesn't. A thoughtful list of 3 to 4 meaningful honors is much stronger than 5 unrelated honors. So, for example, if you are applying for, let's say, economics, honors related to Model United Nations or economic competitions make sense to have in your honors list. But if you are then, putting in honors related to physics or chemistry, that is disrupting your narrative.
Got it. So, just to summarize, the honors should be related to the major and should
Absolutely.
be, yep, and should recognize you at a position, where you're saying, okay, you did something significant towards this major. That's essentially what it is, rather than just slapping something. But quick
Certainly.
question. So let's say if you're doing an economics major, but let's say you topped a physics Olympiad, that would be a hard choice, right? Because you probably made it to like an all Asia level or whatever. So, don't you think not writing that would be a deterrent on your application?
So the first question to actually assess is, Rima, why are you participating in the physics Olympiad to begin with? For someone who's that gifted in physics and talented and has actually won the Olympiad or placed at an international level, the larger question is, why are you then not applying for physics? If your achievements in a certain academic track are stronger than the major you're applying for, that's a signal that there is something incoherent in your entire application narrative. And so it should be, the family, the student, they ought to take a step back and assess, are we having the correct application strategy? Are we showcasing the right strengths of the student? So I would, in that case, if I have physics related achievements which are greater than economics, I would actually apply for physics instead, Rather than economics, the beauty about the American system is it gives you till the end of your sophomore year to actually declare your major. So you ought to be looking at, frankly, it works the other way around. You should be planning in prior to ninth grade about the track you want to follow so that you're experimenting in certain fields, figuring it out if this is for you or this is not for you, and doing your extracurriculars and participating in those competitions accordingly. However, if you wake up in junior year and then are trying to figure out what should I apply for now, then you need to look at the past and see where does my profile stand, where does, what my accomplishments are in, and then build your narrative accordingly.
Got it. So irrespective of where you kind of, I mean, of course, use where you've stood out or kind of gotten a higher rank to decide your major. But if at all, you've digressed, change your track, or just realize this is not for me, somewhere in the middle of your academic journey, like in your high school, still the honor section belongs to accomplishments of the major that you've gotten in, irrespective
Absolutely.
of. Good. I think good to know because I would have, thought about this, and that's pretty enlightening. All right. Next question. How do you help a student figure it out something is genuinely honor worthy versus just padding? Is it school level award? Is a school level award ever worth including?
So absolutely, but context matters far more than prestige alone. A school level award can be very meaningful if it's genuinely selective. For example, being named valedictorian, receiving the school's highest science award, or earning a departmental prize by the faculty is definitely worth mentioning and consideration. What doesn't help is listing every participation certificate or honor roll recognition if it doesn't distinguish the student from their classmates.
Understood. But let's assume that we're looking at an international student, right? So when we're looking at US as a landscape, you have valedictorian, you have these awards, but usually in a country like possibly India or maybe even Pakistan, right? The awards that you get is you're standing in the top 5% of your class, or you were the first five rank holders. Do you think that would count as a good honors section in an absent of probably an AIME, rank or something? Just thinking off the top of my head.
So, standing in the top 5% of your class, in my opinion, should not really make it to your honors list. One of the reasons is that your school counselor it's mandated to fill out the school counselor recommendation. A counselor recommendation is mandatory for almost 98% of the universities out there, especially the selective ones. And the school counselor has to fill out a grid. The school counselor has to rate every student on three dimensions: on their academic capabilities, on their extracurricular abilities, as well as their character. Many students don't know about this, and they have a grid where they have to mark, is that student amongst the best that the counselor has ever seen? So that's the highest, um, marking that the counselor can give a student. And then you have categories of, top 5%, top 10%, top 25%, and so on. And because the school counselor is already making that determination and is putting that as part of your application, it would be redundant to use that space when you ought to be, especially for T20. So, once again, Rima, this depends on the context, right? We have students who are of all sorts. We have students applying with different kinds of grades, students targeting different universities. But if you are targeting Ivy, the Ivies, or the T20, then frankly, I only want to see, for the most part, international or national level awards in your top five.
Understood. That's good to know because this is a question that a lot of people ask, that we don't have a valedictorian system. I stood first for like my ninth grade, my 10th grade, So should I list it? Should I not list it? In fact, this brings up a very important point. Let's assume you decide to exaggerate this a little bit. Instead of the top 15%, you mark yourself as top 5%, but then your counselor kind of grades you in the top 20%. There's going to be a discrepancy in how you are portraying yourself and how your counselor is portraying your application. And I think potentially that could result into an outcome that you possibly don't want to know, right? I mean, an honest, maybe if both of your narratives would have matched, that you would have still made it to a college versus, discrepancy. Do you think that could happen potentially?
I We see it happening. In fact, we see it happening increasingly more and more where there is discrepancy in different elements of the application and inflated projections amongst both the academic honors as well as the extracurricular activities. So, something that we recommend students do in the honors section is be very honest about the exact position they got vis a vis the number of competitors or delegates. So, for example, if you say I came first in my class, contextualize it first out of 200, in your class. Or if it is a national science competition and there were just 60 kids, but it's a national competition, 1/60 competitors, because that context is also important for the admission officers. Second, what admissions officers are increasingly doing, and I'm frankly glad that they're doing this, is checking your digital footprint. So if you've claimed that I have won, the International Science and Engineering Fair, um, expect that even though your application is getting an 8-minute read, that's the average that the entire application gets. Um, they will put in the name of the student and, you know, ISEF and Google. Does anything come up? And if nothing is coming up for a lot of the claims you've put in, that's a red flag for the AO right there, especially if it's not further validated by a counselor recommendation. So, but they are checking your digital footprint now. I tell the students you must leave all the crumbs out there showcasing of what you have done, because otherwise, uh, how do you prove it?
No way. There's no way to you prove it. So better you create that footprint. And I think if when you participate in a competition like ISCF, you would kind of participate it. I mean, you would
Yeah.
get that,
So you would
it's
be,
all over the
you would be
place.
on the website and so on. So it's,
Absolutely.
don't make claims that cannot be backed up.
Basically, don't lie or don't exaggerate, right? Just be
Absolutely.
truthful. It's
Absolutely.
easier to be truthful and get a good admit than lie and get a good admit. That's just the standard rule of thumb in life as well. I have one question before I move to the next question. Is it possible to get into an Ivy League or a T20 school without like having the top of the top honor? Meaning, let's say you've not won at an ISEF, or you've not gone to the AIME, or you've not been at the top of any Olympiad. You've just been qualifying or maybe even lower. Do you think students like that who don't have extraordinary honors, so as to speak in the literal term of the sense of honors, would make it to a T20 or an Ivy League school, given everything else was, of course, in place? Like the SAT score was fine, the academics was fine, the essays are standout. Given everything else is okay, but this one section is kind of weak for this particular student, do you think it would still be possible? Just out of
So,
curiosity.
Rima, the competition is now so intense with thousands of applicants. I mean, look at the acceptance rates. Harvard has an acceptance rate of 3.6%. Vanderbilt has gone to 3%. This is how crazy things are. And so let's say you have everything, but the honors are not there. Um, the probability just lowers. The heartbreaking part about all of this is you can have everything in place, including the honors, and yet if the institutional priorities of that year doesn't match, let's say they want more women in STEM, but you're a male candidate who's applying, and their institutional priorities, a different demographic, those things are at play as well. And when the competition is that intense, what we recommend families to do, you must have a balanced strategic college list. That's a podcast for another day. But a balance of reach, matches, and safeties, because yesterday's NYUs and Vanderbilts, which were once match universities, are now highly selective reach universities. So things have evolved a lot since the parents applied.
Okay. So, I mean, irrespective of whatever, not, you should try to do as much as you can.
Yeah,
Never say never. I think that's what I would say.
absolutely.
That's good to know. All right, next one. So, admissions officers read thousands of these like in a day, right? You said 8 minute read. If somebody's putting in 8 hours worth of work, they're reading at least, I don't know, maybe 100, maybe 100, 200 applications a day. What makes an entry stand out in that tiny character limit, and what makes an admissions officer's eyes glaze over? Oh my God, that's some candidate. What do you think would that entry be?
So the strongest entries are immediately visible. Instead of writing Science Competition Award, write International Biology Olympiad Bronze Medalist or National Merit Scholarship Finalist. Specificity matters. So please, admission officers cannot decode abbreviations. This is a favorite, particularly I see of mun munners, as I call them. They think that the inter-school competitions that they have been participating in, the world knows about them. Normally, it's just confined to to that country and the AO. They would be familiar with the Harvard mun, the Yale mun, but not necessarily your school's inter-school mun. So don't let them guess what the award represents. Clarity beats cleverness every single time. One thing that we also see students doing is merging 2 to 3 awards in one space. Now, if the title of the award is short enough, or you're using the additional information section to expand on the abbreviations, that's okay. But if that is not going anywhere in your application, you're actually hitting yourself on the foot with this strategy.
And that's a great point, because I think a lot of people are excited to share 100 things that they've really, really done. And that's great, right? Kudos, you've been working through your freshman year all the way up till your senior to do all these things, and you may probably have won like 15 awards. But it's important that you prioritize and say, hey, these are the five that I really want to showcase because of the application strategy involved. I think another podcast for another day, which, how do you strategize on what goes where? And that is a strategy. Very few people know that, but I can attest to the fact that it's a strategy. It's not just some random thing put in
Yeah.
or slapped in wherever you feel like. So good to know that. How should a student weigh a national level honor in a niche area against a state level honor in something more mainstream?
So I'd encourage students to think about relevance, selectivity, and authenticity, not just geography. A national honor in a niche field that's directly connected to the student's academic interest may be more compelling than a broader state level award. So admission officers are not ranking awards by the map. They're asking whether this award reinforces the student's intellectual identity. Now, let's, for example, assume that a student is applying for the performing arts or is applying for dance, and a certain national competition in India, which may not be as well known in the US, but once again, if you categorize it, I came third out of 5,000 candidates, puts that award in perspective. And because it's related to dance, which is the major that the student is applying for, will carry more weight, let's say, than even something like the Queen's Commonwealth English Essay Award, because the student is not applying for English. So everyone, a lot of admission officers know about the Commonwealth Queen's Essay Award and not that award, but the dance award is related to the major and should receive a higher position in the ranking of the awards than the Queen's Commonwealth. I'd only put it maybe at number 5 if I have space of not enough other dance awards.
Got it. Got it. What if the dance award was more domestic, like let's say a regional folk song where you've put in 7 years and gained a certificate and you're pretty well known in that art form, versus a Queen's Award, which is more global. And of course, assuming you would go for dance as a major and the admissions may or may not know about the dance because it's more regional versus the Queen's Award. What would you do then if a scenario like that arises?
I would still prioritize the regional dance award and use other forums to kind of showcase the prestige around the award. So, you mentioned uh, kids who have been participating since ninth grade and have collected 15 awards, and where are they all supposed to go, and we don't want them to go to waste, right? So there are other different parts of the application that you can use strategically. You have the additional information section, that's one, but you should not just bury all your throw in all your additional stuff there. We highly recommend students to have use platforms like LinkedIn. You should be cataloging all your achievements over there. If you are a performer, you should have your own Insta account dedicated to dance, or your YouTube account, TikTok, whatever. AOs will now ask you, and applications will ask you to share your relevant social media links. So if you are saying that you are a dancer, then in addition to your portfolio of work, where are you on social media? And those kind of videos with you perhaps performing in front of a huge audience um, is what's going to get documented in your Insta profile, or so on, and that kind of showcases um, how good you are.
So there are other ways of showing stuff, you don't have to like just to get the honors and feel like it's the end of the life if you can't document everything over there.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
most likely, if you're somebody who's been preparing on this, if you've been on this journey for a while now, you most likely have more things that you can actually really put on the application in the honors section. At least that's what I think.
yeah,
I've seen. You
absolutely.
read resumes and you're like, oh my god. Okay, awesome. No, you read it and I'm like, how did you put all of this in, right? But I think they figure out a way, and sometimes just upload a resume. That also
Yeah.
works. So, I mean, the reason somebody's asking you to kind of have a resume is because they're going to read it, hopefully. Okay. What's the most common way this section accidentally contradicts something elsewhere in the application? Activities list, essays, counselor recommendations. I think we already spoke about counselor recommendation, wherein the teacher has to kind of grade the student or kind of categorize the student. But is there a way honors section can contradict essays or activities list? I'm curious to know
Yes,
that.
it can. So, it's something we were touching upon earlier, that let's say a student is presenting themselves as deeply committed to neuroscience. He's applying as a neuroscience major, but their honors section is dominated by unrelated business competitions or generic certificates, or an essay that is emphasizing humility and collaboration, while the application elsewhere is exaggerating your accomplishments. That kind of inconsistency is what flags an antenna in the AO. So the strongest applications feel coherent, and every section should be reinforcing the same overall story. It should all come together as one cohesive narrative.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Fair enough. That kind of makes sense. And again, application strategy remains the key, right? In terms of what you want to demonstrate. I think what I'm trying to say is you could have done other things that are not related to your major and you could have excelled at them before you decided to kind of change your path, but it's not necessary to list them because actually not listing them will possibly be in your favor than listing them. Or
So, ninth grade, Rima, is a year, particularly when students are exploring multiple pathways, which is completely okay. But I think that honesty then ought to be conveyed at, somewhere or the other in your supplemental essays, perhaps, that, in the beginning. So something very common in our region is parents pushing students to pursue medicine or engineering, right? And maybe a year or two down the line, the student pushes back and says, you know what? I am not necessarily a STEM student. I want to pursue economics, crush their parents' hopes and dreams, and say, मैंने डॉक्टर नहीं बनना, so but you had that initial year of shadowships, of exposure, maybe even biology competition wins, and so on. I would rather the student then in their application own up to that narrative and say, you know what, that actually shows greater maturity, that I was pursuing a different path. And this experience made me come into my own. And that is why I've shifted. And then, once again, then the story will be cohesive. So, honesty, being genuine, having your own voice, and being authentic to yourself is the biggest favor you can do to yourself. Because if you deny your first 2 years and claim that you were always into economics, you're actually going in as a weaker candidate, because your economics accomplishments are starting from year 10. What happened in year 9? And you're saying you're always passionate about it. So own up to the fact that, yeah, my dada dadi said that you must have a stethoscope around your neck, and that is the way it's going to be. And I realized that when I was doing this shadowship in the public hospital, that I couldn't take it, but that motivated me to perhaps pursue biotechnology or biomedical engineering. Whatever the case is, own up to your story, because it's the story that is what makes you the most compelling and authentic.
Absolutely. And I think another point that I'd like to highlight is, the Asian culture generally, right, really looks down on making mistakes. So, like,
Yeah,
every time you make a mistake or you realize this is not the right path of you, a very common way is, shaming. Oh, you did something wrong, or, whatever. That's very common, right? So, what happens is generally kids then start kind of saying, okay, you know what, I was always passionate, which is not true, because it is cannot be substantiated with the story. So owning up, and as you
yeah,
rightly said, telling the truth that I tried something, I realized I'm not good at it, I failed, and then I turned around and said, okay, you know what, this is what I'm good at, and I'm going to take that step, gets you in a far far better
I
position than
agree.
somebody who is lying on that application. It's okay to make mistakes, people forgive, life doesn't end at a change of major, for sure,
Yeah.
and life doesn't
No,
even
no,
end
no,
at
not at
when you're
all.
literally failing.
That I think, what some families don't internalize, that vulnerability. Admission officers are humans right now. At the end of the day, we are having Virginia Tech roll out a bot as an AO this year, who's going to be a parallel reader to a human. But for the most part, we have humans this cycle. And it is that, that vulnerability, that human tug and emotion that rings true. I think the AO genuinely gravitates towards that more than the perfectionist from the very beginning. So own that vulnerability, showing that in your application is completely okay. In fact, I would encourage it.
Absolutely. And good to know. I'm so glad that you put this out, because I get these questions so many times that, I just changed. I don't want to do physics anymore. Last year, I had a student who did not want to do physics, started off as a physics student talking to me generally. And she said, now I want to do psychology. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. That's not bigger deal. That's not really that bigger deal. Like, you want to do psychology, you pivot to psychology. Just say you thought you could be a physics major, but now you want to be a psychology major. Life doesn't end at physics or psychology, right? So
No, it doesn't. And the important moment is, what made her realize that switch? What was that experience? What was that interaction? Was it interacting with kids at an autism center, or a deaf institute, that made them realize, this is more meaningful to me. It's that story, putting that story across.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's good to know. You work with a lot of high achieving families, Shanza. How early do you think the start? Do you start the what counts as an honor conversation, and does that change by grade level?
So we begin that conversation as early as ninth grade, usually the summer before ninth grade, because that is when you can start marking things in the Common App. Um, One issue that, once again, South Asian families face, they get their children started from elementary school. And by high school, you see burnout. And I encourage families that let elementary and middle school be a time of exploration, where they are trying out a lot of different experiences, a lot of different summer camps, and figuring out what they like. But in ninth grade, we start becoming a little bit serious, not because we're trying to accumulate awards, because students should understand the difference between pursuing meaningful excellence and chasing credentials. So as students mature, our conversations with them shift from how do I win awards to what kind of work is worthy of recognition. And that's a healthier mindset.
Absolutely, and that's good to know that you can start this early, but again, you do not have to finish everything in ninth grade. It'll happen. Don't worry.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, Shanza. So I have, I think, the second to the last question for this podcast. And I think I learned so much in this process. So really looking forward to last answering these two questions. But the second to the last one is, what's that one thing about this honors section that you wish more counselors or parents understood that almost nobody gets it right on the first try?
So, Rima, I wish more people understood that admissions is about patterns and not isolated accomplishments. Five impressive awards that are not related don't necessarily create a strong application than three honors that consistently reinforce a student's academic direction. So, admission officers are looking for evidence of sustained excellence, not simply a long list. And that's the takeaway I want parents and counselors to understand.
Okay, awesome. Good to know. And you're saying that I think more is not necessarily good. Do less
Alignment.
and more
Yes.
impactful
Yes. And alignment, of course.
to your major. That is super
Yeah.
important. Don't write
Yeah.
about physics when you're doing humanities. That's
Yeah.
just not how
Yeah.
it works. I think we tackled this earlier on also that
Absolutely.
don't use detours to get into colleges if that's not what you are intending to get into. Okay, last question. If you had 30 seconds to leave one piece of advice with parents listening to you right now about the honors section, what would it be?
So I'd encourage parents to shift the conversation from how many awards my child can collect to what kind of work is my child becoming known for. The honor section is not just about proving that your child is successful, it's about showing how consistently they pursue excellence. And when awards emerge naturally from genuine curiosity, sustained effort, meaningful contribution, they become far more persuasive than collecting awards to check off the five boxes. So, one thing I tell families is that prestige is contextual. Admission officers don't simply rank awards from best to worst, they are looking for how selective it is, how relevant it is to the student's academic interest. Is it nationally or internationally recognized? We touched upon this earlier. And does it represent sustained excellence, or is it a one off achievement? um, just a few names that I will leave students with in different fields, for highly selective institutions like the Ivies and MIT and Stanford. So if you're looking at math, then the International Mathematics Olympiad, the IMO, the USA Mathematical Olympiad, USAMO, the Canadian Mathematical Olympiad, CMO. These are all really big. In physics, it would be the International Physics Olympiad, the USA Physics Olympiad, the British Physics Olympiad. In computer science, we would be looking at the International Olympiad in Informatics, USACO Platinum, Google Code Jam, historically the Meta Hacker Club. For engineering, the Regeneron STS, Conrad, First Robotics Championship Awards, Diamond Challenge for Innovation. For medicine, we would be looking at HOSA International Leadership Conference finalists, Genes in Space, economics and business, the International Economics Olympiad, the Wharton Global High School Investment Competition. These are just a few. The list is humongous. And so the idea is, if I'm doing arts, I would like to see a young arts winner, a scholastic art national medal winner, a National Young Arts Foundation award. Your list will be completely different from somebody doing astronomy versus somebody doing computer science. So don't just chase awards for the heck of it. It needs to align with your story.
Got it. Got it. And one last question on my side, awards versus essays, because I know this is something that comes a lot of times to me. And they're like, oh, but I have a lot of awards. My essays may not be the best, or my essays are fantastic. My awards are not the best. How would generally colleges weigh in? And if at all you knew that, let's look at the top eight Ivy leagues and maybe one or two Ivy plus leagues, which one would consider which more important or at the same level? Let's say if you're taking an MIT, would it say awards versus essays? Which one's more important? If we could do that for students, if at all, of course.
No, so once again, Rima, I do think it is holistic. If your essays are terrible and everything else is in place, it's automatically a flag for the admission officer. What happened? And with the amount of competition in these universities, if you have one weak link, automatically, your chances are significantly reduced. So the idea is for each piece of the common application to reinforce the other. um, you can have impressive awards. And yes, being an Olympiad winner, for instance, and maybe your essays are an 8 out of 10 will work. But if your essays are a 2 out of 10, then, it would be a problem.
Correct. So, I mean, and I think you phrased it right that, sometimes a child, and especially this happens with my STEM kids, right? A lot of people who are so STEM oriented find it difficult to express their creativity when it comes to words. So, oftentimes they find themselves not writing as creatively as they would desire. It's good, but it's not good enough. So, a lot of times they come back and ask, hey, but you know what? I see that X student going for psychology may not have as many honors as I do, but they definitely write better than I do. Maybe if they're a 10 on 10, I'm probably a 7.5. So, would that mar my profile considering the amount of work I've put in? So, that's what I was trying to actually ask you.
So, for the STEM students, one thing I'd advise them to do is not get intimidated by the vocabulary, perhaps, or writing style of a refined piece of prose. For those STEM kids, that story in your own voice with simple words in simple English is much more powerful. But the idea is tell your story. And that's the part where if they open up, is the perfect thing. Not looking again, in fact, for these days, that refined prose is actually a flag that it's coming from, an admissions consultant is somewhere in the background being a puppeteer. So having, in fact, vulnerability and flaws in your essays is a good way to go.
Good to know. I think that's a great summary. And the fact that, you may not be the most eloquent writer doesn't work against you. As long as
No.
you're honest, truthful, and put in your best foot forward, it doesn't put you any lesser than somebody who is probably a natural writer. And with that said, I think I truly, truly enjoyed this podcast, Shanza. I learned so much, and I'm sure the viewers will also learn. Any last words that you would like to have? The cycles are ramping up, and the next 2.5 months, you'll have your early decisions coming through. So, any piece of
So
advice for
not
everybody?
related to academic honors, but I think one key issue that I've seen in the past two cycles, the starting point and foundation of this entire exercise needs a lot of thinking, which is your strategic university list. What universities are making your list? Because the university of yesterday that were matches that parents considered, in fact, safeties. I give the example of Northeastern, over and over again, are today's reaches. And looking at the numbers is critical. Vanderbilt has an acceptance rate of 3%. You cannot put Vanderbilt as a match university in your list. It is a highly reached university. And so, one issue that is very close to my heart is the psychological impact on students as they're going through this year, because their list is imbalanced. They get a lot of rejections, and then, all that trauma and everything starts surfacing. Get your list right, and you should be okay. So that would be my advice for parents and for students, to have a closer look at their university list, make sure that their matches and safeties are actual matches and safeties, not what they think is the case. Look at the numbers, look at the acceptance rates for both early decision and regular decision. And so, that I have safeties on my list, I'm happy with the safeties on my list, is very important to this discussion.
Good to know. I think a great point. Parents, please, please, please listen. Do not just base your judgments on something that somebody's told you whose child's actually gone to an ex college 2 or 3 years ago, because the circumstances are not the same. The competition is not the same. And the number of people going to these universities are definitely not the same. But with that said, I would like to wrap up today's podcast. Shanza, thank you so much for your time. I truly, truly appreciate it. It was amazing to have you over, and probably next time around we talk about a balanced list, which I think happens to be a very, very important topic from what I understand on how we can kind of go about doing it. But I truly appreciate your time, and thank you again.
No, it is my pleasure, Rima. It's always an honor to join you.
Awesome. Also, viewers and listeners, see you next week with another guest, this time around talking about different issues. Our next topic this time is about financial aid. So stay tuned and we will talk more about it. See you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.